Framed for shattering priceless art, Elena watched her six sisters' future shatter too. But the ruthless billionaire owner of the damaged artifact appeared, not for revenge, but to claim her. He offered terrifying, absolute protection, unleashing his empire to destroy her enemies and declare her his. Caught in his dangerous obsession, she realized her gilded cage was her only sanctuary. The faint scent of turpentine and aged parchment clung to Elena's worn apron, a comforting ghost amidst the sterile gleam of the Thorn Gallery's restoration lab. Her hands, usually so steady, trembled ever so slightly as she feathered a brush across the cracked surface of a Renaissance fresco fragment. Each stroke was a prayer, a delicate act of breathing life back into forgotten beauty. But beauty, she knew, did not pay the bills. It certainly didn't cover the astronomical cost of Anya's treatments. Her sister, Anya. The name itself was a raw ache in Elena's chest, a constant, dull throb beneath her ribs. Anya, vibrant and clever, now tethered to a hospital bed, her laughter replaced by the rhythmic hiss of machines. Elena, 26, felt centuries older, weighed down by a responsibility that seemed to stretch into infinity. Every hour spent hunched over precious art, every microscopic chip painstakingly repaired, was another dollar toward Anya's fragile existence. She remembered the warmth of Anya's small hand in hers, the innocent questions about colors and shapes, a world away from the cold reality of 4 drips and hushed doctors' consultations. The memory fueled a quiet, desperate fire in her, a resolve that clawed at the edges of her exhaustion. She had to keep going. Mr. Thorne, the gallery's owner, a man whose smile rarely reached his eyes, often glided through the lab, a predatory shadow. He'd pause, observe Elena's meticulous work, then dismiss her with a curt nod, as the magic happened by itself. Her name never graced the plaques beneath the restored pieces, her expertise rarely acknowledged beyond the closed doors of this lab. She was the ghost in the machine, the vanishing girl, meticulously crafting masterpieces that would bring Thorne untold fortune, while she herself was slowly, quietly disintegrating. The indignity of it, the quiet theft of her credit, burned a bitter trail in her throat, a constant reminder of her powerlessness. She was a tool, nothing more, to be used and discarded when no longer convenient. Tonight was one of those nights where the disparity felt like a physical blow. The gallery was abuzz with a nervous energy, preparing for a private auction of ancient Roman artifacts, a collection so rare, so historically significant. It had drawn the city's wealthiest and most ruthless collectors out of their gilded cages. Elena had spent the past 3 weeks meticulously cataloging and preparing several pieces from the collection, including a particularly stunning marble bust of a Roman emperor, its intricate carvings whispering tales of forgotten empires. She knew its history, its fragility, its secrets. She knew it belonged to a man named Dante Volkov, a name spoken in hushed, almost reverent tones, a reclusive billionaire whose reputation was built on steel and shadows. The thought of a man like that, a figure of such immense, dangerous power, even vaguely connected to her work, sent a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. His very existence felt like a thunderclap in the quiet storm of her life. Petrova. 5 minutes. Thorne's sharp voice, cutting through the heavy silence of her concentration, made her jump. He stood framed in the lab doorway, silhouette of impatient authority. His tailored suit, always impeccable, seemed to shimmer with ill-gotten gains. The bust needs to be moved to the display podium. Be quick. Our esteemed guest will be arriving momentarily. Guest. Singular. Elena knew exactly who he meant. Mr. Volkov. The sheer weight of his impending arrival, the unspoken demands, settled heavily on her. She cleaned her brushes with trembling fingers, the pungent scent of cleaning solution momentarily masking the artistic aromas. Her stomach, empty for hours, twisted with a dull ache. She hadn't eaten since a stale pastry for breakfast, too caught up in her work, too anxious about Anya's latest hospital bill. The pressure was a suffocating blanket, pressing down on her lungs, making each breath a conscious effort. Her vision blurred at the edges, a symptom of her chronic exhaustion. If anything went wrong tonight, anything at all, Thorn would ensure she bore the full weight of it. She couldn't afford to fail. Anya couldn't afford it. The thought was a relentless hammer blow to her already fragile composure. The main gallery hall was transformed. Soft, strategic lighting cast dramatic shadows, making the ancient artifacts glow with an almost ethereal light. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, reflecting off polished marble floors. The air, usually smelling of dust and old art, was now thick with expensive perfumes, the faint metallic tang of champagne, and the nervous anticipation of immense wealth changing hands. Liveried staff moved with silent efficiency, their hushed whispers barely disturbing the classical music that flowed from hidden speakers. The atmosphere was one of carefully curated luxury, a golden cage designed to hold fortunes and secrets. Elena carefully, painstakingly, positioned the Roman bust onto a velvet-draped pedestal near the center of the room. It felt impossibly heavy in her gloved hands, yet fragile, as if a single wrong move could shatter centuries of history. The cold marble of the bust seemed to hum beneath her touch, a silent testament to its age and value. She smoothed down her simple black uniform dress, feeling utterly out of place amidst the opulent displays and the soon-to-arrive elite. She was a shadow among titans, a mere worker bee in a golden hive built for others. Her invisibility had always been her armor, her defense against a world that had little regard for people like her. But tonight, that invisibility felt like a vulnerability, a premonition of being lost and forgotten should disaster strike. A deep, gnawing anxiety settled in the pit of her stomach. She stepped back, surveying her work, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. The bust looked magnificent, truly, a testament to ancient craftsmanship and her own quiet dedication. But the entire setup felt precarious, a house of cards waiting for a single gust of wind. Every shadow seemed to lengthen, every hushed whisper to carry a hidden threat. Thorn, now mingling near the entrance, a venomous smile plastered on his face, glanced her way. His eyes, devoid of warmth, conveyed a silent threat. "Don't you dare mess this up, Petrova." His gaze felt like a physical prod, a reminder of the leash he held. A liveried assistant approached the pedestal, holding a small velvet cover. "All set, Miss Petrova?" he asked, his voice hushed. He was young, eager, and clearly intimidated by the impending guests. "Yes, it's secure," Elena replied, even as a shiver ran through her. A flicker of uneasiness sparked within her. "Just be careful when removing the cover before the bidding starts." The base is deceptively heavy. She felt a strange, inexplicable urge to warn him further, to reinforce the delicacy of the ancient relic, but held her tongue. It wasn't her place. He nodded, but his gaze was already drifting towards the grand oak doors that now swung open. A wave of hushed greetings rippled through the gallery. The first of the major collectors had arrived, their laughter sharp, their power palpable. Elena knew her presence was no longer required, no longer welcome. She began to retreat towards the shadows, back to her lab, back to the safe anonymity of her solitary work. The sooner she could escape this glittering prison, the better. But as she reached the edge of the dazzling light, a deep, unsettling tremor vibrated through the marble floor. A faint, almost imperceptible shift. Her eyes darted back to the pedestal. The bust, still covered, seemed to sway. A sudden, sickening lurch. Her breath hitched. Before she could process the thought, a sharp, metallic clink echoed through the tense silence of the gallery, followed by a sickening crack. A collective gasp rose from the newly arrived patrons, quickly stifled into stunned silence. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She knew. She just knew what that sound meant. Her entire body froze, dread a cold, heavy hands squeezing her throat. The fate of Anya, her own desperate struggle, hung precariously in the balance. And then, from the now wide-open doorway, a figure emerged, his presence an almost tangible force, his eyes dark and unreadable, sweeping over the scene. The air in the gallery thickened, heavy with an unspoken power, and Elena felt a new, terrifying chapter of her life begin to unfold, a chapter where invisibility was no longer an option. The crystal chandeliers, usually shimmering with elegant light, now seemed to splinter into 1,000 shards of nervous energy. The tremor Elena felt wasn't just the marble floor. It was the very air of the gallery, suddenly heavy, charged with impending disaster. Her gaze snapped back to the pedestal with a Roman bust, that ancient, dignified face, now pitched precariously. The young assistant, his face pale with alarm, fumbled with the velvet cover he'd been instructed to remove. His hands, clearly unaccustomed to the weight, slipped. A sharp grating scrape tore through the hushed tension, followed by a sickening thud that vibrated through Elena's bones. The bust, still partially shrouded, hit the pedestal with a jarring force. A collective gasp rippled through the few early arrivals, their champagne flutes frozen midair. Elena didn't think, she reacted. Years of instinctively protecting fragile art took over. With a choked cry, she lunged forward, hands outstretched, trying to brace the ancient marble, to cushion its fall, to somehow impossibly defy gravity and fate. Her fingers grazed the cold stone as it tilted, then toppled. A horrifying crack split the silence, not a clean break, but the brutal sound of centuries-old marble giving way. A chunk of the emperor's nose, an irreplaceable fragment, hit the polished floor with a pathetic, echoing tink. The velvet cover finally slipped entirely, revealing the ruined face, stark and tragic under the glittering lights. Silence, absolute and devastating, descended upon the gallery. It wasn't the respectful quiet of connoisseurs admiring art. It was the stunned, breathless silence of a catastrophe unfolding. Elena stood frozen, her gloved hands still hovering uselessly, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. The scent of dust and old stone, now mixed with a bitter tang of dread, filled her nostrils. Her breath hitched, catching in her throat like a physical obstruction. Petrova, what in God's name have you done? Thorne's voice, shrill and venomous, sliced through the quiet, sharper than any broken marble. He rushed forward, his face a mask of theatrical horror and thinly veiled rage. You clumsy, incompetent girl. I leave you with one simple task, and you destroy a priceless artifact belonging to one of the most powerful men in the city. Elena flinched as if struck. The injustice of it, the immediate, unthinking shift of blame, was a familiar, burning brand. She opened her mouth to protest, to explain the assistant's carelessness, the subtle wobble she'd felt earlier, but no words came. Her throat felt raw, constricted by humiliation. Her eyes, wide and stinging, darted to the shattered piece on the floor, then to the assistant, who was now cowering, pale as a ghost, hiding behind Thorne. He said nothing, offering no defense, no shred of support. Alone. She was always alone. Priceless. This is an outrage. A booming voice erupted from the small cluster of guests. A man, portly and red-faced, with a thick gold chain glinting from his open collar, stomped forward. Mr. Elias Thorne, a notorious collector whose reputation for ruthlessness almost rivaled Volkov's. I'd almost secured my bid on this piece. My collection. You think this is acceptable, you little waitress? He spat the word waitress like a curse, his eyes, glinting with a dangerous mix of fury and greed, fixed on Elena. He took another step, his heavy, expensive shoes echoing on the marble. The scent of his cloying cologne, sickly sweet and aggressive, filled her space. Look at her. Hands covered in dust, probably trying to pilfer the smaller pieces. This is what happens when you let street urchins touch real art. His voice rose, verging on a roar. I'll have your job. Your entire pathetic life will be ruined. You hear me, girl. His hand, a thick, meaty claw, shot out, grabbing Elena's wrist with surprising force. Her breath caught, a sharp gasp escaping her lips. The sudden pain, a stark reminder of her physical vulnerability, made her stomach clench. Her uniform felt suddenly too tight, too constricting. The cameras flashed, a dozen phones now aimed squarely at her, capturing her humiliation, her terror, her utter helplessness. This was it. This was the abyss she had feared. Anya's face, pale and fragile, flashed before her eyes. Release her. The voice was a low rumble, deep and steady, yet it cut through the cacophony like a finely honed blade. It wasn't a question, it was an absolute command. Everyone froze. The flashing phones paused. Mr. Thorne's rant died on his lips. Elias Thorne's grip on Elena's wrist loosened, his head whipping around. From the Grand Oak entrance, where the commotion had drawn the attention of the arriving patrons, a figure emerged. He didn't stride, he descended. Dante Volkov. Elena's eyes, still wide with unshed tears, were drawn to him with an almost magnetic force. He was taller than she'd imagined, his frame lean and powerful, cloaked in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that seemed to absorb the light around him. His hair, dark as midnight, was swept back from a sharp, intelligent face. But it was his eyes that truly captivated and terrified her. They were obsidian, depthless and unreadable, yet radiating an undeniable, predatory intelligence that seemed to dissect every person in the room. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't gesture wildly. His stillness was his power, a silent storm building. He moved slowly, deliberately, like a predator confident in its domain. The hushed whispers that had accompanied his entrance died away, replaced by a suffocating silence. He walked past Thorne, who visibly straightened, past the cowering assistant, his gaze fixed on Elias Thorne's still clenched hand on Elena's wrist. I said, Dante repeated, his voice barely above a whisper, yet it echoed with an unnerving authority. Release her. Elias Thorne, for all his bluster, was no fool. He met Dante's gaze for a fleeting second, and Elena felt his hand instantly recoil from her wrist as if burned. The sudden release left her arm aching, a faint red mark already blooming on her pale skin. He stumbled back, a nervous gulp visible in his thick neck. Volkov. Mr. Volkov, my apologies. This woman, she destroyed a part of your collection, he stammered, attempting to regain some semblance of control. Dante Volkov didn't acknowledge Elias Thorne. His eyes, now colder than the ancient marble, moved from Elias to the shattered bust, then to Elena. His gaze was intense, analytical, lingering on her trembling form, on the tear tracks streaking her dusty cheek, on the faint red imprint on her wrist. Elena felt exposed, laid bare under his scrutiny, a curious mix of fear and a strange, desperate spark of hope flickering within her. He didn't look at her with pity or disgust or even anger. He looked at her like a problem to be solved, or perhaps a valuable artifact misplaced. He took one more step, closing the small distance between them. The subtle scent of his cologne, dark, expensive, and a little dangerous, like worn leather and old money, enveloped her. He didn't touch her, but his proximity alone was a physical force. He then glanced at Thorne, who was now practically trembling under the weight of his gaze. The bust, Dante said, his voice flat, emotionless, is part of my collection. The damage is my concern. And this woman, his eyes returned to Elena, sweeping over her, a possessive glint igniting in their depths, is no longer yours to accuse. He paused, letting the words hang in the air, heavy with unspoken threats. Then, his gaze piercing, he added, gather what remains of the artifact, Petrova. You will repair it. Elena blinked, stunned. He knew her name. Her mind raced, a chaotic storm of confusion, fear, and a strange, terrifying sense of something shifting irrevocably. He had implicitly acknowledged her skill, even as he implicitly claimed her. She was no longer just the vanishing girl. She was now, inexplicably, entangled with a man whose shadow stretched far wider than any art gallery. She felt a shiver, a cold dread mixed with an undeniable electric thrill as Dante Volkov, without another word, turned, his presence still dominating the room, and then began to move towards the shattered bust, his focus now solely on the damaged history and the woman who had tried to save it. He had claimed the art, and in doing so, he had, without asking, claimed her. There in the restoration lab, usually a sanctuary of quiet focus, now hummed with a different kind of tension. Elena stood before Thorne's polished mahogany desk, her hands clasped tightly behind her back, trying to project an illusion of calm she didn't feel. The faint scent of chemicals, mingled with Thorne's cloying, expensive cologne, made her stomach churn. His eyes, glinting with a cold satisfaction, were fixed on her, assessing, savoring her discomfort. Petrova, Thorne began, his voice dripping with false regret. This gallery values its reputation above all else. And your regrettable performance at the auction has cast a rather unfortunate shadow. He leaned back in his leather chair, a predator enjoying the chase. Given the severity of the incident and the high-profile nature of the collection, I'm afraid your services are no longer required. Elena's breath hitched. Fired. The word hit her like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. She had expected it, perhaps even braced for it, but the reality was a devastating freefall. But Mr. Thorne, that was not my fault. The assistant was careless, irrelevant. Thorne slammed a hand on his desk, making her jump. You were responsible for the bust. And now not only is it damaged, but whispers are circulating about other irregularities. Missing fragments. Discrepancies in the inventory. His smile was insidious. Tell me, Miss Petrova, have you perhaps been borrowing from the gallery's less conspicuous pieces? Perhaps to cover mounting personal debts. The accusation hung in the air, a poison dart. Embezzlement. The word clawed at her throat, sharp and terrifying. That's a lie. Elena's voice was a desperate whisper, hoarse with shock. I would never. Wouldn't you? Thorne interrupted, his tone chilling. He pulled a file from his drawer, sliding it across the polished surface. Elena's eyes widened, recognizing the distinct blue logo of Anya's hospital. Anya Petrova. Diagnosis: rare autoimmune disorder. Prognosis: guarded. Cost of treatment: astronomical. A desperate sister, perhaps, driven to desperate measures. Fear, cold and crushing, seized her. He knew. He knew everything. This wasn't just about her job. It was about Anya. You can. Oh, but I can. His voice was a silken threat. Sign this confession, admit your negligence and your indiscretions, and perhaps we can keep this quiet. Otherwise, I assure you, Miss Petrova, not only will your reputation be utterly destroyed, but your sister's medical insurance will suddenly find reasons to discontinue coverage. Elena stumbled back, her knees weak. The walls of the lab seemed to press in on her, suffocating. The cold steel of the desk bit into her palms. He wasn't just threatening her. He was threatening Anya, her fragile, precious sister. The very core of her being screamed in protest, but the raw, visceral terror for Anya silenced her. She fled Thorne's office, the echoing laughter of his security guards following her like a tangible darkness. The next few days were a blur of desperate, futile attempts. Elena tried calling lawyers, only to be met with polite dismissals or exorbitant fees she couldn't afford. She scoured her apartment for any proof of Thorne's previous exploitations, any email, any note, anything to clear her name, but found nothing. He was too smart, too careful, covering his tracks like a master criminal. Her cramped apartment, usually a refuge, now felt like a lonely, dusty prison. The flickering fluorescent light in her kitchen cast long, mocking shadows. She barely ate, barely slept, haunted by Thorne's chilling words, by the image of Anya's weakening smile. Anya's hospital room, normally a place of quiet strength, now felt permeated by a dull, aching despair. Anya, pale and thin in the sterile white sheets, coughed weakly, a sound that tore at Elena's heart. Elena, you look tired, Anya whispered, her voice barely audible. Did something happen at the gallery? Elena forced a smile, a brittle facade over her crumbling world. No, sweetie. Just busy. Everything's fine. But Anya's discerning gaze, even clouded by illness, seemed to see right through her. The weight of her sister's vulnerability was a physical burden, crushing her pride, her independence. Then, one rainy afternoon, as Elena sat hunched over her small, rickety kitchen table, staring at a stack of overdue bills, the doorbell rang. A sharp, insistent chime that made her jump. Through the peephole, she saw not Thorne's goons, but a man in a perfectly tailored dark suit, his face unreadable. He held a card. Luca Romano. Consigliere. Volkov Industries. Elena's heart pounded. She opened the door a crack. Luca's eyes, cool and assessing, met hers. Miss Petrova. Mr. Volkov has extended an offer. I don't need charity, Elena snapped, her voice trembling despite her attempt at defiance. She hated the thought of being beholden to anyone, especially a man like Volkov. She'd clawed her way through life, always on her own. Luca's expression didn't change. This is not charity. It is protection. Thorn is a cornered rat. He will destroy you and your sister. Mr. Volkov dislikes collateral damage, especially when it involves his interests. He paused, letting the implication hang. The offer is simple. You relocate to a secure residence. You cease all communication with Thorn. You work under Mr. Volkov's direction at his art foundation. In exchange, your name will be cleared, and your sister's medical expenses will be permanently managed. Permanently managed. The words echoed in her mind. Freedom from the suffocating financial burden. Anya's life secured. But at what cost? Elena felt a surge of resentment, a fierce primal need to resist. I don't belong in his world, she whispered, her voice cracking. I won't be owned. Luca's gaze hardened infinitesimally. Miss Petrova, you are currently being owned by a man who wishes to destroy you. This is a different kind of ownership, one that offers a future. The choice technically is yours. But understand, Thorn's next move may not be a threat to your reputation. It may be a threat to your life or your sister's. Mr. Volkov is not asking. He is simply stating the terms of your survival. The cold, hard truth slammed into her. Survival. Anya's survival. Her defiance, her pride, crumbled into dust. She was powerless, cornered, utterly alone. She closed her eyes, a single tear escaping, tracing a cold path down her cheek. When do I start? She whispered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. Luca nodded once, a hint of something that might have been approval in his impassive eyes. No. Pack a small bag. A car is waiting downstairs. Elena stood in the center of her cluttered, beloved apartment for the last time. The worn sofa, the stack of art books, the wilting potted plant, all symbols of a life she fought so hard to build, now being left behind. She picked up a framed photo of Anya, her sister's bright, optimistic smile a stark contrast to the despair in Elena's heart. She was trading one cage for another, a golden one perhaps, but a cage nonetheless. She was walking into Dante Volkov's world, a world of untold power and unsettling security, where her freedom would forever be redefined. As she stepped into the sleek, black sedan waiting silently at the curb, the rain began to fall, tapping softly against the tinted windows. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red, mirroring the chaotic kaleidoscope of emotions churning within her. She was a pawn, moving on a chessboard she didn't understand, controlled by a hand she couldn't see. And as the car pulled away, leaving her old life swallowed by the urban sprawl, Elena couldn't help but wonder if this new, gilded prison would be her salvation or simply a more comfortable way to disappear entirely. The sleek black sedan glided through the rain-slicked streets, a silent, luxurious cocoon separating Elena from the city she knew. Each passing streetlight was a muted blur through the tinted windows, erasing the familiar landscape of her old life. The leather seats, cool and supple beneath her, were a stark contrast to the worn fabric of her usual bus ride, the very air in the car infused with a scent of expensive upholstery and a faint, indefinable power. Elena clutched her small, hastily packed bag, a meager collection of essentials that felt pathetically inadequate for this new, daunting chapter. They arrived at a monolithic glass tower, its summit piercing the low-hanging clouds. The underground garage was a hushed realm of polished concrete and gleaming high-end vehicles. Security cameras blinked with cold, watchful eyes from every corner. Luca Dante's formidable consigliere, opened her door with an efficiency that brooked no argument, leading her to a private elevator that whisked them upwards in a breathless ascent. The penthouse, when the doors parted, was a breathtaking expanse of glass and steel, suspended seemingly between the city below and the inky sky above. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic vista of glittering lights, a dizzying tapestry of urban life stretching to the horizon. The air here was cool, filtered, carrying the faint, sterile scent of newness and meticulous cleanliness. It smelled not of money, but of absolute control. Minimalist furniture, sleek, dark, impeccably arranged, defined vast, open spaces. No clutter, no personal flourishes, no warmth. It was stunning, intimidating, and utterly devoid of the chaotic comfort of her cramped apartment. This wasn't a home. It was a statement. "Your room, Miss Petrova?" Luca's voice was neutral, guiding her down a long, silently lit hallway. The guest room was larger than her entire previous living space, a sanctuary of pale walls and soft, indirect lighting. A king-sized bed, dressed in crisp, expensive linens, dominated the space. "Rosa, the housekeeper, has already prepared it. If you require anything, the phone on the nightstand connects directly to Mr. Volkov or myself." Elena nodded, her throat tight. The phrase, "anything you require," felt less like an offer and more like a carefully worded boundary. She was here under his terms, a guest, a ward, a prisoner of circumstance. As Luca closed the door behind him, the silence of the room enveloped her, heavy and profound. She was alone, yet intensely aware of the layers of security, of the unseen eyes and silent ears that surely monitored this gilded cage. On the bed, a selection of clothes lay neatly folded: soft cashmere sweaters, tailored trousers, simple, elegant dresses in muted tones. Not her size, but perfectly her size. A blush crept up her neck. Had he ordered someone to guess her measurements? Or had he simply known? The thought was both unsettling and strangely compelling, a testament to his meticulous, almost obsessive attention to detail. This was indirect comfort, a silent promise that her needs would be met, her dignity preserved, even as her freedom was curtailed. She didn't see Dante that first evening. She heard him, though. The murmur of his deep voice from what she assumed was his study, the faint, authoritative ring of a phone call. His presence, even unseen, was a palpable force, a hum beneath the polished floors. He was a constant, watchful shadow, a quiet power simmering just beyond her sight. Elena ate a perfectly prepared, simple meal that appeared at her door, savoring each bite of real food, a stark contrast to her usual skipped dinners and cheap instant noodles. The uneasy comfort settled over her like a heavy blanket. The next morning brought a new set of instructions. Elena was to spend her days in a small, private office within the penthouse, away from the main operations of the Volkov Industries downtown. There, she would begin work on cataloging and assessing a portion of Dante's private art collection, legitimate, pristine, and breathtakingly valuable. It was a task she loved, yet performing it within these glass walls, under his unspoken dominion, felt like a luxury she hadn't earned, a skill repurposed for a new, unnerving purpose. Dante sometimes appeared during her working hours, a fleeting, powerful presence. He would stand in the doorway, his silhouette framed against the cityscape, observing her with those dark, unreadable eyes. He rarely spoke, but his gaze was a physical touch, intense and unwavering. Elena often found herself holding her breath, acutely aware of the clean, masculine scent that seemed to precede him, a mix of expensive cologne, faint tobacco, and something intrinsically powerful. One afternoon, as she was meticulously examining a fragile porcelain vase, Dante entered her office. He didn't sit. He merely leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed, watching her. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken questions and simmering tension. "The bust from Thorne's auction," he finally said, his voice a low, resonant rumble that vibrated through the quiet room. "Luca informs me you believe it can be restored." Elena met his gaze, surprised. "Yes, Mr. Volkov. The damage is significant, but the core structure is intact." With time and the right techniques, it can be brought back to good. He cut her off, not rudely, but with an absolute finality that left no room for debate. He pushed off the doorframe, his movements fluid and precise. Ensure you have everything you require for the restoration. Specialized tools, materials, anything. He glanced at her desk, then back to her. And ensure you are comfortable, Miss Petrova. Absolutely no interruptions to your work. Or your peace. The words, a direct order meant for her comfort, sent a peculiar shiver down Elena's spine. Her peace. It was a foreign concept, a luxury she hadn't known existed. His watchful gaze, his quiet command to his staff to ensure her well-being, the meticulous attention to her needs. It was all part of his protection. Yes, but it felt like something more. Something possessive. Something that curled in her stomach with a mix of trepidation and an undeniable, forbidden fascination. Later that evening, as Elena sat on a minimalist sofa in the living area, nursing a cup of herbal tea that had appeared as if by magic, Dante entered. He wasn't in a suit now, but a dark, open-collared shirt that somehow made him seem even more formidable. He poured himself a drink, amber liquid swirling in a heavy glass, and settled into an armchair opposite her. The city lights glittered behind him, framing him like a dark king on his throne. Their eyes met across the vast, silent space. His gaze, usually so guarded, seemed to soften infinitesimally, a subtle shift that sent a jolt through Elena. She felt a growing awareness, a dangerous recognition, that this man, with his quiet power and his unsettling care, was slowly, irrevocably, laying claim to her world. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was charged, thick with an unspoken understanding, a simmering tension that promised to ignite. She was an artifact in his collection, a treasure he was carefully protecting. But even a treasure, she knew, could find itself utterly trapped within a golden cage, and the bars of this one were growing more beautiful and more binding with every passing day. The days had settled into a rhythm within a glass tower. Elena spent her mornings meticulously restoring a series of 18th-century miniature portraits from Dante's private collection, her analytical mind finding solace in the delicate work. Her afternoons were dedicated to organizing his vast art archives, a task that unveiled the true breadth of his wealth and his discerning, almost encyclopedic knowledge of art history. The scent of old paper, leather, and the faint, sweet perfume of antique wood filled her private office, a pleasant contrast to the sterile air of the main penthouse. She had grown accustomed to the subtle hum of the building, the silent efficiency of Rosa, the housekeeper, who left perfectly brewed herbal teas on her desk without a sound. She'd even grown accustomed to Dante's fleeting appearances, a silent shadow in the doorway, his eyes dark and assessing, a brief nod, a murmured instruction to Luca about some complex business matter, then he was gone. He remained a distant, formidable presence, a solar system around which her new life revolved. Yet, within this gilded cage, Elena had found a strange, unsettling semblance of peace. Anya's medical bills were now handled with an almost shocking efficiency, a constant stream of updates arriving directly from the hospital to Luca's secure channels, then gently relayed to Elena. The gnawing fear for her sister's survival had receded, replaced by a quiet gratitude that felt both liberating and deeply binding. One crisp autumn afternoon, Luca informed her that a package of specialized solvents she had ordered for a particularly stubborn restoration needed to be collected from a secure drop-off point, a discreet art supply house a few blocks away. It was a rare opportunity to step outside, a brief reprieve from the glass tower. Elena felt a flicker of nervous excitement. She craved the fresh air, the anonymous bustle of the city. Luca assured her a car would take her, and a discreet security detail would accompany her, though they would remain out of sight. The city, when she stepped out of the sleek black car, assaulted her senses. The cacophony of car horns, the distant wail of sirens, the vibrant kaleidoscope of passers-by. It was overwhelming after days of pristine silence. The scent of exhaust fumes mixed with roasted nuts from a street vendor, a stark, real-world perfume. She clutched her small handbag tighter, feeling a prickle of unease despite Luca's assurances. The anonymity she had once cherished now felt like a fragile shield. She quickly found the art supply house, a quaint, unassuming storefront tucked between a bustling cafe and a high-end boutique. Inside, it smelled of paint and canvas, a nostalgic aroma that tugged at her heart. She collected her package, a heavy box of glass vials, and headed back out, eager to return to the quiet sanctuary of the penthouse. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, a shadow fell over her. Two men, tall and broad, with faces like uncarved stone, emerged from the alleyway beside the shop. They didn't wear suits, but their casual clothes, though expensive, seemed to cling to massive, muscular frames. Their eyes, cold and calculating, fixed on her. The casual street noise seemed to fade, replaced by a dull roar in Elena's ears. Well, if it isn't Thorne's little art thief," one of them sneered, his voice a low growl that sent a shiver down her spine. His breath smelled faintly of stale cigarettes and something metallic. The other man simply stared, his gaze chillingly empty. Elena froze. The box in her arms suddenly felt impossibly heavy. Her carefully constructed piece shattered, replaced by a jolt of raw, visceral fear. "I don't know what you're talking about," she managed, her voice barely a whisper, a pathetic attempt at defiance. "Oh, the first man chuckled, humorless sound." He took a step closer, crowding her space. The pungent scent of his cheap cologne was cloying, suffocating. "Boss says you found yourself a new sugar daddy. A very rich sugar daddy. But Thorne doesn't like loose ends, sweetheart. Especially little birds who sing to the wrong people." A tremor ran through her. Her hands began to shake, the glass vials in the box rattling faintly. "Leave me alone," she pleaded, her voice cracking. Her mind raced, a chaotic storm of panic. Where was the security detail Luca had promised? Were they watching? Could they even help against men like these? These weren't petty thugs. They carried an air of controlled menace, a subtle promise of violence that made her stomach clench. Or what? The second man spoke for the first time, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. "Your new boyfriend going to send his big, scary bodyguards after us? We already know about your sick sister, Such a shame if anything were to happen to her treatment." The blood drained from Elena's face. Anya. He was talking about Anya. The veiled threat, casual and devastating, was a brutal reminder of her utter helplessness. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about her sister's life, dangling precariously in Thorne's grasp. Terror, cold and absolute, seized her, making her legs weak, her vision blur. She pressed herself against the cold brick wall of the shop, trying to make herself invisible, small, forgotten. Before she could form another word, before another breath could escape her burning lungs, a figure detached itself from the indifferent stream of pedestrians. Luca. He appeared not with a flourish, but with the quiet, deadly precision of a hunting hawk. Two other men, equally unsmiling and impeccably dressed, materialized behind him, their gazes like honed blades. There was no shouting, no dramatic threats, just an undeniable, chilling shift in the atmosphere. The two goons from Thorne, previously so confident, visibly stiffened. Their easy sneers vanished, replaced by a flicker of genuine fear in their eyes. The air around Luca and his men seemed to thicken, radiating a silent, formidable power that had nothing to do with size and everything to do with absolute authority. Luca didn't speak. He simply stopped a few feet from Thorne's men, his posture relaxed, yet radiating a coiled tension. His eyes, dark and direct, met the first goon's. The message was clear, unspoken, but utterly terrifying. You are out of your depth. You are playing a game you cannot win. Retreat or face consequences you cannot comprehend. The goons exchanged a panicked glance. The air crackled with the silent standoff, a deadly ballet of implied threats. Then, almost imperceptibly, Thorne's men began to back away, slowly at first, then with increasing haste, melting back into the alleyway from which they had emerged. They didn't run, but their retreat was absolute, their shoulders hunched, their previous bravado utterly dissolved. The scent of their cheap cologne lingered, a faint, repulsive memory. Elena sagged against the wall, her legs trembling so violently she thought they might give out. The box of solvents threatened to slip from her numb fingers. She was shaking from head to toe, her heart still hammering against her ribs, the echoes of their threats reverberating in her mind. Lucas stepped forward, his expression still impassive, but his presence a steady anchor in her chaotic world. "Miss Petrova," he said, his voice calm. "Are you all right?" She could only nod, unable to speak, tears pricking at her eyes. Relief, so potent it felt like pain, washed over her. She was safe. For now. Just then, another black sedan, identical to the one that had dropped her off, pulled silently to the curb. The back door opened, and Dante Volkov stepped out. He didn't need to be informed. His dark eyes, colder and sharper than she had ever seen them, swept over her trembling form, the lingering fear on her face. He glanced at Luca, who gave a minute shake of his head, a silent report on the non-event. Dante then looked back at Elena, and for the first time, Elena saw not just power, but a raw, simmering fury in his gaze, carefully banked, but undeniable. He walked directly to her, his movements fluid and purposeful. The subtle scent of his expensive cologne, usually a symbol of his control, now felt like a comforting embrace. He reached for her, his large, warm hand closing around hers, the one that still clutched the box of solvents. It wasn't a gentle caress, but a firm, possessive grip, a silent declaration in the open street. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, a small, reassuring pressure. "Elena," he murmured, his voice low, a soft rumble meant only for her. "No one touches what is mine." The words, a dangerous promise, sent a jolt through her. She looked up into his obsidian eyes, and in their depths, she saw not only the ruthless efficiency of his power, but a possessive claim that both terrified and profoundly, deeply resonated with a part of her she hadn't known existed. In that moment, surrounded by the indifferent city, with his hand holding hers in a public display of absolute ownership, Elena understood the true extent of her reliance on him. The golden cage suddenly didn't feel like a prison, but a fortress. And she, the vanishing girl, was now fiercely, irrevocably protected. The hum of the city, a distant, ceaseless murmur, was the only sound breaking the profound silence of Dante's penthouse. Elena sat at the massive oak table in the dining area, a half-eaten plate of perfectly prepared pasta growing cold before her. She was sketching, not an antique, but a whimsical, almost childish drawing of Anya laughing, her delicate features captured with tenderness that brought a painful lump to Elena's throat. The encounter with Thorne's goons had left a lingering tremor in her hands, a phantom chill that no amount of warmth could quite dispel. The fear for Anya, once a constant, dull ache, had flared into a scorching terror. Dante entered the room, his presence a ripple in the stillness. He had shed his suit jacket, his dark shirt unbuttoned to the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong, corded forearms. The subtle scent of his expensive cologne, now familiar, preceded him. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid glinting in the low light, then settled into an armchair opposite her. His gaze, as always, was direct, unblinking, assessing. "You're still working," he observed, his voice a low, even tone. It wasn't a question, but a statement that carried the weight of expectation. Elena startled, quickly flipping her sketchpad closed, a blush rising to her cheeks. "No, Mr. Volkov. Just thinking." The life felt thin and fragile. She never quite knew how to act around him, how to navigate the intricate labyrinth of his expectations. Her usual composure felt like a tattered cloak in his presence. He merely raised an eyebrow, a silent challenge. "Luca informed me you received the additional solvents. Were they to your satisfaction?" "Yes, thank you. They're excellent quality." She looked down at her hands, still faintly trembling. The lingering image of Thorne's goons, their cold eyes and casual threats, replayed in her mind. A wave of helplessness washed over her. Even here, in this fortress, the outside world could still reach her through the terrifying vulnerability of Anya. "You were shaken today." His voice was softer now, a subtle shift that compelled her to meet his gaze. There was no judgment, only a keen, almost predatory observation in his dark eyes. They threatened Anya, Elena whispered, the words catching in her throat. The confession was a raw, aching admission of her deepest fear. They knew about her treatments. Dante's jaw tightened, a subtle flex of muscle. His eyes, usually unreadable, flickered with something dark and unsettling, not anger at her, but a cold, dangerous fury directed elsewhere. He took a slow sip of his whiskey, the ice clinking softly in the vast silence. Thorn is desperate, he stated, his voice flat. Desperate men make mistakes, but they also become more dangerous. He paused, his gaze fixed on the city lights outside. I once knew a man like Thorn. Elena looked at him, intrigued despite her fear. This was new. A crack in the impenetrable facade. Your father, she asked, almost without thinking. A ghost of a smile, cold and humorless, touched his lips. No, worse. A man who preyed on the vulnerable, on those who had no voice, no power. He ruined lives slowly, meticulously, always staying within the letter of the law, until he chose not to. He took another sip, his eyes distant, unfocused, lost in a memory. My mother, she lost everything because of him. Not just money, her spirit, her belief in justice. Elena's heart ached with a sudden, profound empathy. She saw it then, a flicker of the boy he might have been, watching helplessly as someone he loved was systematically destroyed. It mirrored her own pain, her own desperate fight for Anya. And you couldn't stop it, she asked softly, surprised by her own boldness. He turned his gaze back to her, and the raw intensity in his eyes stole her breath. No, he said, the word a quiet, brutal admission of failure. I was too young, too weak. I made a promise then, that I would never again stand by and watch a woman be broken by men like that. The revelation hung between them, heavy with unspoken history. Elena felt a strange pull towards him, a recognition of a shared wound, a similar fire that had forged them both in different, brutal ways. He wasn't just a ruthless billionaire, a possessive captor. He was a man shaped by loss, driven by a primal need to protect what he deemed worthy. Anya. Elena began, her voice softer, more confiding now. She's always been the light, even when things were darkest. My parents, they weren't strong. It was always just me and her. She found herself telling him about their childhood, the tiny apartment, the sacrifices, the fierce, unwavering love she had for her sister. She's so fragile, Mr. Volkov, but she's also so strong. She never complains. She just fights. Dante listened, his obsidian eyes never leaving her face. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer platitudes. His silence was a weighty, understanding presence. When she finished, a raw vulnerability exposed, he finally spoke. She is lucky to have you, Elena. The words were simple, yet they held an unexpected depth of sincerity. Your talent, your resilience, they are not lost on me. You fight for what you love, with everything you have. I respect that. He rose from his armchair, moving with that fluid, predatory grace, and stopped beside her. Elena's breath hitched, her body tensing, acutely aware of his proximity. The air between them crackled, thick with unspoken attraction. He reached out, not to her face, not to her hand, but gently, deliberately, he placed his palm on her forearm, just above the faint red mark where Thorn's goon had grabbed her. His touch was a jolt, an electric current that shot straight through her. It was warm, firm, utterly possessive, yet imbued with a startling tenderness that made her eyes sting. You underestimate your own strength, Elena, he murmured, his thumb brushing lightly, almost imperceptibly, against her skin. And your worth. Elena looked up at him, her gaze meeting his. In the depths of his dark eyes, she saw not just the power, not just the possessiveness, but a flicker of something raw, something hungry, something that recognized a kindred spirit in her. The chemistry between them, long simmering beneath layers of fear and formality, ignited with an undeniable force. It was a dangerous, thrilling recognition, a silent promise of fire. She wanted to pull away, to maintain her distance, but her muscles felt locked, her breath caught in her throat. His touch was a tether, binding her to him in a way that went beyond mere protection. He leaned closer, his scent enveloping her, intoxicating and dangerous. Her heart pounded, a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, the subtle tension in his jaw. The silence stretched, fraught with unspoken desire, with the weight of burgeoning trust and a terrifying, irresistible attraction. Just as she thought he might lean in further, might finally bridge the distance, he slowly, reluctantly, withdrew his hand. "Get some rest, Elena," he said, his voice a low, rough murmur. His eyes, however, still burned with an intensity that promised more. "Tomorrow we begin to truly dismantle Thorn." Elena could only nod, her voice lost somewhere in her throat. As he turned and walked away, his shadow disappearing down the long hallway, Elena remained frozen, her arms still tingling from his touch, her mind reeling. She was no longer just his ward, his project. She was becoming something more, something inextricably intertwined with this powerful, dangerous man. And the thought, terrifying as it was, sent a dangerous, thrilling tremor through her very soul. The quiet hum of the penthouse, once a soothing balm, now felt like the oppressive drone of a gilded cage. Elena sat in her private office, the Roman bust, now meticulously pieced back together, gleaming under the specialized lights. The work had been her anchor, the delicate restoration a stark contrast to the brutal chaos of her new reality. A sense of cautious optimism had begun to bloom in her chest, nurtured by Dante's unwavering, if silent, protection and the promise of Anya's stable care. That fragile hope shattered with the sharp ping of a news alert on the secure tablet Luca had provided for her. It was a feed curated to filter out direct threats, meant to keep her informed, but shielded. Today, the filter failed. The headlines screamed, bold and vicious, art thief exploits ailing sister and blackmail plot, Senator Bennett connection revealed. Elena's blood ran cold. The image beneath the headline was a blurry, doctored photo of her, looking disheveled, overlaid with Thorn's smirking face. But it was the accompanying article that truly twisted the knife. It painted her as a conniving manipulator, using Anya's rare autoimmune disorder as leverage, fabricating stories of abuse to gain sympathy and financial backing from powerful, unsuspecting men. It even subtly linked her to the previous waitress incident involving Senator Bennett's daughter, weaving a malicious web of lies that connected her to a shadowy underworld. Anya. The name screamed in her mind. Her private pain, her sister's vulnerability, exposed and weaponized for public consumption. Betrayal, sharp and agonizing, pierced through her carefully constructed defenses. How? How could Thorn have known such intimate details about Anya's condition? Only a handful of people, including the hospital staff and Dante's people, had access to that information. Panic, cold and suffocating, seized her. Her breath hitched, her lungs burning. She stared at the screen, her vision blurring, the words morphing into monstrous accusations. Exploits ailing sister. The phrase echoed, a devastating condemnation that stripped her bare. She could handle attacks on her own character, but Anya? Her fragile, innocent Anya, dragged into this dark, venomous world? Her hands trembled so violently the tablet clattered to the floor, the screen cracking faintly. She stumbled to her feet, the luxurious carpet suddenly feeling like quicksand beneath her. The penthouse, usually a sanctuary, now felt like a vast, isolating prison. The walls, once a symbol of protection, were now the very confines of her humiliation. Just then, Dante walked in. He moved with his usual quiet power, a dark, imposing figure against the backdrop of the shimmering city. He held a tablet of his own, his expression grim, his jaw tight. He had seen it too. Thorn, he stated, his voice a low growl, is lashing out. Desperate, as I said, desperate. Elena's voice was a ragged whisper, laced with a raw, burning anger that surprised even herself. She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. He's destroying her. He's using Anya. How could he know all that? Her medical records, the specifics, her eyes, burning with unshed tears and accusation, locked onto his. How did he get that information, Mr. Volkov? You promised me security. You promised me protection. Dante's expression remained unyielding, a mask of controlled fury. My team is investigating the leak. It came from the hospital's internal servers, not from my network. Thorn has corrupted contacts everywhere. Corrupted contacts? Elena laughed. Harsh, humorless sound. Betrayal, hot and bitter, surged through her. Or perhaps your protection simply paints a bigger target on my back. Perhaps being associated with a man like you just made me more vulnerable. You drag me into your world, you claim me, you tell me I'm safe, and then this happens to my sister. Her voice rose, raw with accusation, ignoring the silent alarm bells ringing in her head, the inherent danger of challenging him. This isn't protection, Mr. Volkov. This is a gilded cage where I watch my loved ones get torn apart for your war. His eyes, usually pools of obsidian calm, now hardened, a storm brewing in their depths. You believe I would intentionally endanger your sister? His voice was low, dangerous, a tremor of suppressed rage vibrating beneath the surface. You believe I am the one to betray you? I don't know what to believe. Elena cried, tears finally streaming down her face, a torrent of fear and frustration. All I know is that before I met you, Anya was safe if struggling. Now her illness is a weapon, and she's a pawn in your game with Thorn. Your methods, your control, they suffocate me. They make me a bigger target. She felt choked, isolated, utterly alone in her panic. The weight of his power, once a comfort, now felt like an unbearable burden, an iron leash around her neck. Dante took a slow, deliberate step towards her, his presence utterly dominating the room. You think you understand my methods, Elena? You think a leak from a corrupted hospital staff is a betrayal on my part? I promise to keep you safe. And I will. His voice was a dangerous whisper, his eyes burning with a possessive fire that both terrified and held her captive. This is not a game, Elena. This is a war. And you are in it. Like it or not. He gestured to his tablet, his thumb tapping the screen. A new image appeared, a grainy, threatening text message. Thorn's latest. He's threatening to release Anya's full, unredacted medical history to the most sensationalist tabloids, unless you publicly retract your accusations against him and declare your innocent association with me. Elena gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. He wouldn't. He would. And more. Dante's eyes locked onto hers, cold and unwavering. He's also subtly implying a direct physical threat, a regrettable accident during her transfer to a specialist clinic, a misplaced file that delays life-saving treatment. His words were calm, clinical, utterly terrifying. He wants you to break. He wants you to run. He wants you to disappear, taking all the blame with you. Her knees buckled. Anya. Kidnapping. Delays in treatment. The horror of it was a physical punch to the gut. Elena stumbled back, her eyes wide with unadulterated terror. No, I can't. I can't let him. I have to. Her mind raced, frantic, desperate. She felt a profound, aching betrayal, not just from Thorn, but from the cruel indifference of the world that allowed such evil. And in that moment, the suffocating presence of Dante, his powerful, dangerous control, felt less like protection and more like the cause of her current agonizing despair. I have to go to her, she whimpered, turning towards the door, a primal instinct to protect Anya overriding all logic, all fear, all the boundaries he had set. She needed to be with her sister, to shield her, to face this monster alone if she had to. But Dante moved faster. He stepped in front of the door, blocking her path, his frame an unyielding wall. No, he said, his voice flat, absolute. You don't go anywhere, Elena. Not alone. Not now. His dark eyes burned with an intensity that promised a storm, a hurricane of controlled fury about to be unleashed. This ends tonight, but it ends on my terms. And my battlefield. The chilling finality in his tone, the steel in his gaze, sent a fresh wave of terror through Elena. He was going to war. And she, his reluctant ward, was irrevocably caught in the brutal crossfire, the ultimate prize in a battle she never asked for. The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, no. Dante's voice was a low, guttural rasp, utterly devoid of warmth, a sound that sent a primal shiver down Elena's spine. He stood before the door, an unyielding wall of muscle and suppressed rage, blocking her frantic escape. His dark eyes, usually so controlled, now blazed with a terrifying, untamed fire. The raw fury, carefully banked for weeks, was finally unleashed, and it was a storm of devastating power. "You don't go anywhere," he repeated, his gaze pinning her in place. "Not alone. Not now." His head tilted infinitesimally, the subtle movement brimming with lethal intent. "Thorn thinks he can use your sister to break you. He thinks he can threaten what is mine." A dangerous, almost imperceptible tremor ran through his voice. He just signed his own death warrant. Elena stared at him, her own fear momentarily eclipsed by the sheer, unadulterated force radiating from him. This was not the distant, calculating billionaire. This was a predator, stripped bare, his every instinct focused on retribution. The air in the room crackled, thick with his simmering violence. Dante didn't wait for her reply. He pulled out his phone, his movements sharp, precise. "Luca," he barked into the receiver, his voice like chipped ice. "Pinpoint Thorn's exact location. Every known associate, every recent transaction. I want every single data point. And secure Anya Petrova's transfer. Immediately. Highest priority. If a single hair on her head is harmed, if her treatment is delayed by 1 second, you know what to do." His final words were delivered with a chilling certainty that left no room for interpretation. The promise of ruthless reprisal was implicit, absolute. Elena watched him, her heart thundering against her ribs. The man who had been a shadowy protector was now a whirlwind of decisive, terrifying action. He was a force of nature, untamed and uncompromising. He moved to his sprawling desk, sweeping aside papers, pulling up multiple screens. Codes, maps, financial data, and encrypted messages flashed across them, a dizzying display of his vast, clandestine empire. His fingers flew across the keyboard, a symphony of power and speed. "He's at his private vault." Luca's voice, calm and efficient, echoed from the phone's speaker. "Trying to move the last of the illicit stock. We have a tail on his main security detail." "No tail," Dante snapped, his eyes never leaving the screen. "Head on. I want him boxed in. And I want the media alerted to a high-profile police investigation at that address. An anonymous tip from a concerned citizen." His lips curled in a chilling smile. "Let them clean up my mess for once." He ended the call, his gaze turning back to Elena. The raw fury was still there, but now it was tempered by a steely, focused resolve. "You stay here," he commanded, his voice firm, unwavering. "Luca will ensure Anya is moved to a secure, private clinic. You will not leave this penthouse until I return. Do you understand?" Elena could only nod, her throat too tight to speak. She felt the strange mix of terror and a dangerous, almost intoxicating thrill. This wasn't just about her safety. It was about his absolute claim, his declaration of war on anyone who dared to touch what was his. He grabbed his jacket, a dark silhouette against the glittering city lights, and moved towards the private elevator. Just as the doors began to slide shut, Elena found her voice. "Dante," she cried, the name escaping her lips unbidden. He paused, holding the doors open with single powerful hand, turning his head slightly. His eyes, still blazing, met hers. "Be careful," she whispered, her voice laced with a desperate plea. A flicker of something, acknowledgement, perhaps even a dark satisfaction, crossed his face. Then, with a curt nod, the doors closed, swallowing him whole. Elena was left alone, surrounded by the unsettling silence of the penthouse, the echoes of his fury still vibrating in the air. She moved to the enormous window, staring out at the labyrinthine city, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against the glass. She felt a profound sense of isolation, yet paradoxically, she also felt utterly connected to the storm he was unleashing. Her fate, Anya's fate, was now entirely in his hands. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Elena paced the vast living area, her mind a maelstrom of fear and anticipation. She pictured Thorn, smug and arrogant, being confronted by Dante. She imagined the sheer force of his presence, the terrifying aura of absolute power. Suddenly, a series of urgent alerts flashed across the large screen embedded in the living room wall, a discreet news feed Dante clearly monitored. Breaking news: police raid Thorn Gallery's private vault, allegations of art fraud. A live video feed flickered to life. Sirens wailed, blue and red lights pulsed erratically, painting the night with a frantic glow. Uniformed officers swarmed the street outside a nondescript building that Elena recognized as Thorn's secondary, highly secret storage facility. He stood amidst the chaos, a calm, unmoving figure at the center of the storm. He wasn't participating in the physical raid, but he orchestrated it. Luca and other men, their faces grim and efficient, moved with an almost surgical precision, guiding officers to specific crates, pointing out hidden compartments. Thorn's security guards, once menacing, were now pale and disarmed, their bravado shattered. Thorn himself emerged from the building, dragged out by two stern-faced detectives. He looked disheveled, his expensive suit disheveled, his face ashen, fear finally etched into his features. He saw Dante, and his eyes widened with a mix of terror and impotent rage. He tried to lunge, shouting incoherent threats, but was immediately restrained. Dante didn't acknowledge Thorn's struggle. He didn't even look at him. His focus was on the journalists, now swarming the scene, their microphones thrust forward. He stepped forward, his expression cold and unyielding, a picture of calm authority amidst the pandemonium. "Mr. Volkov," a reporter shouted, "can you confirm allegations that Thorn Gallery has been involved in a massive art fraud scheme, including the sale of stolen artifacts from your own collection?" Dante's gaze, captured by the camera, was direct, unblinking, utterly lethal. "What I can confirm," he stated, his voice resonating with an icy clarity that carried over the sirens and the clamor, "is that Mr. Thorn has systematically exploited and defrauded countless individuals and institutions. My team has compiled irrefutable evidence of his illegal activities, which we have provided to the authorities. These include the trafficking of stolen cultural heritage and the malicious framing of an innocent, talented young woman, Miss Elena Petrova." Elena gasped, pressing her hand to her mouth. He had said her name, publicly, not as an accomplice, but as a victim, exonerated. He was not just tearing down Thorn, he was rebuilding her reputation in front of the world. Miss Petrova was a dedicated restorer, whose expertise Thorn regularly stole and whose reputation he attempted to destroy, using her vulnerable sister's medical condition as leverage. Dante's voice dropped, becoming a low, dangerous growl. "Let it be known, any individual, any institution, any publication that chooses to perpetuate Thorn's lies or attempts to further harm Miss Petrova or her family will face the full, unbridled force of Volkov Industries. My resources are vast. My patience, non-existent." The silence that followed his declaration was absolute. The journalists, usually ravenous for sound bites, seemed momentarily stunned, intimidated by the sheer, unyielding power of his statement. This was more than a businessman providing evidence. This was a warlord issuing a decree. Anya. Elena remembered his last command to Luca. She frantically tapped the tablet, searching for news of her sister. A new update flashed. Anya Petrova transferred to state-of-the-art private medical facility, condition stable. A wave of profound, overwhelming relief washed over Elena, so powerful it almost brought her to her knees. Anya was safe. Dante, his public address complete, turned, his gaze sweeping over the scene one last time. He gave a curt nod to the lead detective, a gesture of absolute control, then turned his back on the chaos, walking towards a waiting black SUV. As he climbed into the back, his eyes, still burning with a dark, triumphant fire, seemed to search the glittering facade of his penthouse, finding Elena, even from miles away. He had won. Absolutely. Decisively. He had dismantled Thorn, cleared her name, and secured Anya's safety, all with a terrifying, breathtaking display of absolute power. Elena stood by the window, watching the distant blue and red lights fade into the urban sprawl. A shiver, not of fear, but of profound, unsettling awe ran through her. He was indeed dangerous, ruthless, uncompromising. And in his brutal, absolute victory, Elena felt a new, terrifying truth solidify in her heart. She was irrevocably, utterly, and terrifyingly his. The war was won, but the depth of his claim had just been revealed. The aftermath of Dante's decisive strike against Thorn was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. The news cycle, once saturated with Thorn's insidious lies, now spun with Dante's chilling revelations. Headlines screamed of Thorn's downfall, a widespread art fraud, and the exploitation of vulnerable employees. Elena's name, once dragged through the mud, was now synonymous with injustice overcome, a symbol of resilience. Her talent, previously stolen and suppressed, was finally recognized, lauded even, in the unexpected glow of public sympathy. Elena spent the days following Thorn's public dismantling in a strange, disoriented state of relief. The sheer emotional toll of the smear campaign, coupled with the terrifying threat to Anya, had left her utterly drained. She moved through the penthouse like a phantom, the opulence a muted backdrop to the quiet hum of her recovery. Dante was a constant, if often unseen, presence. He didn't hover, didn't demand. Instead, his support manifested in 1,000 subtle ways. Luca, ever efficient, ensured her favorite herbal teas were always on hand, her meals prepared exactly as she liked them. The news feeds on her tablet, once a source of terror, now brought updates of Anya's steady improvement, her voice sounding stronger during their daily video calls from the new state-of-the-art private clinic. Anya's bright, optimistic smile, once fragile, was slowly regaining its vibrant light. The gnawing fear that had defined Elena's existence for so long finally began to recede, replaced by a deep, almost overwhelming sense of gratitude. One evening, Elena found Dante in his study, the room filled with the scent of old books and expensive leather. He was on the phone, his voice low and firm, discussing the finer points of Thorn's financial ruin. Elena paused at the doorway, hesitant to interrupt. He was no longer the raging storm of the billionaire's fury, but the calm, calculated architect of retribution, dismantling an empire piece by piece. Ensure his accounts are frozen, every offshore asset repatriated, Dante dictated, his eyes fixed on a complex spreadsheet on his screen. His reputation, his influence, leave nothing. I want him to understand what it means to touch what is not his. His tone was cold, precise, utterly devoid of mercy. Elena shivered, a blend of awe and a prickle of fear. This was the true extent of his power, the dark, uncompromising justice he wielded. He wasn't simply winning, he was annihilating. And she, in a strange, unsettling way, felt a dark satisfaction bloom in her chest. Thorn deserved this. He deserved to lose everything, just as he had tried to make her lose everything. Later, Dante found her on the living room balcony, wrapped in one of his soft, oversized cashmere throws, watching the city lights glitter below. The cool night air felt crisp and clean, a stark contrast to the suffocating fear of days past. Anya's vitals are strong, he said, his voice quiet, joining her at the railing. The new treatment regimen shows promising results. She'll be discharged within the month, provided her progress continues. Elena turned, her eyes shining with unshed tears of relief. Thank you, she whispered, the words choked with emotion. Dante, I don't know how I can ever thank you. He shook his head, his gaze fixed on the sprawling city. You owe me nothing for protecting what is mine. His voice was low, possessive, yet now it held a deeper resonance, a different kind of claim. Thorn's gallery is being liquidated. All assets seized to compensate those he defrauded. Your name has been formally cleared. The police investigation concluded with his full confession. His confession? Elena blinked, surprised. Dante's lips curved in a faint, humorless smile. He was persuaded to see the benefits of cooperation, especially once his full financial entanglement with other illicit activities was laid bare. Elena swallowed, a knot forming in her stomach. You mean you blackmailed him? His gaze met hers, dark and unwavering. I ensured he faced the full consequences of his actions. He tried to destroy you and Anya. He deserved to be destroyed in return. The cold certainty in his voice was absolute. Justice, Elena, is rarely pretty, but it is effective. She looked away, a wave of complex emotions washing over her. The sheer brutality of his methods, the ruthless efficiency, should have repelled her. But knowing what Thorn had tried to do, how close he had come to ruining her and Anya, a strange, dark sense of vindication settled deep within her. He was a force of nature, a dangerous protector, and his justice, however dark, had been absolute. I still don't understand how you knew about Anya's records about the threat, Elena confessed, a lingering thread of doubt in her voice. Dante leaned against the railing, turning to face her. Thorn had informants, people he paid. A nurse in Anya's old hospital was compromised. My team uncovered it during the initial stages of Thorn's dismantling. We secured Anya's information the moment we discovered the vulnerability, but the public smear campaign was already in motion. He paused, his eyes softening infinitesimally. I would never deliberately put her at risk, Elena. You must believe that. The earnestness in his voice, the rare glimpse of vulnerability, pierced through her lingering fear. She met his gaze, and in his obsidian depths, she saw not just the ruthless billionaire, but the man who had suffered loss, the man who had promised himself he would never again be too weak to protect. Ah, I do, she whispered, her voice trembling with the admission. The last vestiges of her distrust, her resentment of his control, began to dissolve, replaced by a profound, humbling gratitude and a burgeoning understanding. His methods might be dark, but his intent, where she and Anya were concerned, was undeniably pure, fiercely protective. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her chin, tilting her face up to meet his eyes. His thumb brushed over her cheekbone, a tender, possessive touch that sent a shiver through her. Your strength, Elena, is not in fighting alone. It is in knowing when to accept protection and when to allow someone to fight for what is rightfully yours. Elena felt her heart pound, a frantic drum against her ribs. The raw intensity of his gaze, the possessive claim in his touch, was undeniable. She had witnessed the terrifying extent of his dark justice, and instead of recoiling, a dangerous, thrilling understanding had taken root. She was safe. Anya was safe. And that safety, that newfound peace, had been bought by Dante Volkov's unyielding power. In the reconstruction of her life and the retribution against her enemies, Elena was beginning to see that Dante's dark methods were simply the cost of absolute protection. And for the first time, she was willing to pay it. The scent of freshly polished wood and rare orchids permeated the newly renovated Volkov Art Foundation. It was a stark contrast to the dust and despair that had once clung to Elena's old lab, a scent of promise and renewal. Sunlight streamed through the vast skylights, illuminating ancient tapestries and contemporary sculptures alike, bathing the grand hall in a warm, inviting glow. Elena, now the head curator, moved through the bustling pre-opening event with a quiet confidence that would have been unimaginable just months ago. Her hands, once calloused from endless restoration work and trembling with fear, now held an elegant glass of champagne, her movements assured, authoritative. She wore a dress of deep emerald silk, a gift from Dante, its rich fabric flowing around her, making her feel both powerful and undeniably beautiful. Anya, vibrant and laughing, her cheeks finally plump with health, flitted through the crowd, excitedly pointing out a modern abstract piece to Luca, who surprisingly offered her a rare, almost gentle smile. Anya's recovery had been nothing short of miraculous, a testament to the cutting-edge care Dante's resources had provided. Her laughter, clear and unburdened, was the sweetest music Elena had ever heard. Elena paused by a restored Roman mosaic, its intricate patterns now gleaming, a testament to her meticulous work. The fragment of the Emperor's nose, once shattered on Thorne's floor, was now seamlessly reattached to the bust, standing proudly in a glass case, a symbol of broken beauty made whole again. Every piece in this gallery, every polished surface, every hushed conversation about art, spoke of a life rebuilt, a future secured. Thorne, the man who had sought to destroy her, was now a forgotten whisper, his name synonymous with ruin. His empire had crumbled to dust, his reputation utterly annihilated by Dante's cold, systematic retribution. Justice, Elena realized, could be a terrifying, relentless force in the right hands. A hand warm and possessive settled on the small of her back. The familiar electric jolt that coursed through her was no longer a tremor of fear, but a frisson of undeniable, thrilling recognition. Donna. He stood beside her, a commanding presence in his perfectly tailored dark suit, his eyes, dark as polished obsidian, sweeping over the crowd, then settling on her. The subtle scent of his expensive cologne, a blend of power and danger, enveloped her, a comforting anchor in this glittering new world. "The opening is a success," he murmured, his voice a low, resonant rumble that only she could hear. "Your work, Elena, shines." Her heart swelled with a quiet pride. "It's our work, Dante. You built this. You gave me the canvas." His lips curled in a faint, possessive smile. "I merely provided the foundation. The beauty, the vision, that is all yours." He paused, his gaze intensifying, a silent conversation passing between them that transcended the polite chatter around them. "But the foundation, is mine." Elena met his gaze, unafraid. The word mine, once a source of apprehension, now resonated with a different truth. It wasn't about ownership of a possession. It was about the deep, possessive love of a man who saw her worth, who had chosen her, and who would move heaven and earth to protect her. She was not a possession to be displayed, but a partner to be cherished, fiercely, absolutely. He led her subtly toward a more secluded alcove, where a small stage had been set up for a brief, impromptu address. The crowd, sensing his movement, began to quiet, their attention drawn to the powerful figure who now commanded their respect, their fear, and their fascination. Dante stepped onto the stage, pulling Elena gently with him, his hand never leaving hers. A collective murmur rippled through the gallery as all eyes turned to them. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dante began, his voice carrying effortlessly, filling the vast space with an authority that silenced every whisper. "Thank you for joining us tonight at the grand opening of the Volkov Art Foundation. This institution represents not merely a collection of masterpieces, but a commitment to art, to truth, and to the unwavering pursuit of justice." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the faces in the crowd, then settled firmly on Elena, his grip on her hand tightening, a silent, powerful affirmation. "Tonight, I stand before you, not just as the founder of this institution, but as a man who has learned the true meaning of value. Not in the monetary worth of an artifact, but in the immeasurable worth of integrity, resilience, and unyielding spirit." Elena's heart pounded, a frantic drum against her ribs. She felt the weight of every eye, every unspoken question. But she also felt his unwavering strength beside her, a bulwark against the world. "My head curator, Miss Elena Petrova," Dante continued, his voice deepening, each word a deliberate, resonant claim, "was once a victim of gross injustice, her talent stolen, her character maligned, her future threatened by those who sought to profit from deceit. She stood alone, facing a world that sought to break her." He turned fully to Elena, his obsidian eyes burning into hers, filled with an intensity that laid bare the raw, possessive devotion he felt. "I witnessed her strength. I witnessed her unwavering commitment to those she loves. And in her, I found something I didn't know I was searching for." He lifted her hand, his thumb tracing the faint scar on her wrist, a silent reminder of the trials she had endured. "Elena Petrova is no longer merely the head curator of this foundation. She is the heart of it, the soul. She is my partner, my equal, my strength. He looked out at the hushed crowd, his voice dropping to a low, powerful murmur that carried the weight of an absolute, unbreakable vow. And as such, let it be known to every individual here and to every corner of this city, Elena Petrova is under my unwavering protection. Any threat to her, any disrespect, any attempt to undermine her will be met with the full, unbridled force of everything I command. She is not to be touched. She is not to be questioned. She is not to be harmed. She is mine. The word hung in the air, a dangerous, thrilling declaration. It was not the claim of an owner over property, but the fierce, possessive declaration of a powerful man over the woman he had chosen, the woman who was his universe. A gasp rippled through the crowd, quickly stifled. They understood. They saw the absolute, unyielding devotion in his eyes, the terrifying promise of retribution in his stance. Elena's eyes, filled with a shimmering moisture, met his. The journey, the fear, the struggle, the rebuilding, it all culminated in this moment. She saw not a captor, but a protector. Not a master, but a partner who had bent the world to make room for her. Dante then looked at her, his voice softening, becoming intimately hers alone, even as it resonated through the hall. Elena, he said, and then slowly, deliberately, he knelt before her, pulling a small velvet box from his inner jacket pocket. The crowd gasped again, a collective intake of breath. A magnificent diamond, set in dark, intricate metal, glittered in the light. I have done terrible things in my life. Taken, broken, burned. But with you I found something good. Something worth building. Something worth cherishing above all else. He opened the box, his eyes never leaving hers. Be my wife, Elena. Be the sovereign of my heart. And let the world know you are mine, not by force, but by choice. Tears streamed freely down Elena's face, not of sorrow, but of profound, overwhelming joy. The golden cage had transformed into a fortress of love. The invisible girl had become the queen. Yes, she whispered, her voice trembling, but firm. Yes, Dante, I will. He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, its weight a comforting, binding promise. Then he rose, pulling her into a fierce, possessive embrace. Their lips met, not gently, but with a raw, undeniable hunger, a kiss that sealed their unbreakable bond, a declaration of a love forged in fire and darkness, now shining brightly in the light. The applause, when it finally erupted, was deafening, a testament to the undeniable power of their story, their love. Elena, nestled safely in Dante's arms, felt a profound, enduring peace. She was no longer just the vanishing girl. She was seen. She was chosen. She was cherished. And with Dante, her dangerous, magnificent king, she had finally found her forever. Have you ever felt invisible, your worth overlooked, your quiet resilience mistaken for weakness? Elena's journey reminds us that the deepest scars can become the most beautiful proofs of survival, and the fierce burdens we carry for love are the very fabric of our strength. This story isn't just about a powerful billionaire saving an art restorer. It's about finding a love that sees your true value, protects your heart fiercely, and claims you, not as property, but as your chosen partner. Your past hurts don't define you. You deserve a love that sees you, cherishes you, and builds an empire around your peace. If Elena's triumph resonated with the sovereign heart within you, join our community. Like this video, subscribe for more transformative stories, and comment below. I am seen. Let's keep believing in love that heals and claims.